Welcome to INKOSHO in Conversations. My name is Chibesa, founder of INKOSHO. Today, I have a panel discussion on education. We have Olga from Mexico, Elisa from Colombia, Audrey, Kenyan British, George, South African, Barath from India, and Demi from China. And we aim to address some of the key challenges in education. This panel means business when it comes to education.
So how organization embedding learning? I mean, is it similar to what we see in schools? Is there a difference there?
I think it starts before learning, actually, because, correct me if I'm wrong from your guys' perspective, but the way it was always drummed into me is you go to school, you get good grades. You get good grades so you can get into a good high school. You get good grades at the high school so that you can get into a good university. And then at university you do well, get good grades so you can get a good job. And that is always the end. So there were people I went to high school with who said, oh, well, I'm not going to university. And I said, what? How is that possible? Because for me, that was never even an option. It never occurred to me that you wouldn't do that. But then, of course, once you leave university, despite having the best grades in the world, there are all sorts of external factors that nobody warns you about. The economic climate, where you live, the availability of the types of jobs you might be interested in, the type of degree that you have studied in order to get a job that will achieve whatever it is that you want. So I think it's a big chain. And it needs to go all the way from the employer. Stop putting so much emphasis on what did you get at uni? Did you get a first? Did you get a 2-1? Did you get a whatever? Ignore that. Can you do the job? Because most jobs, in my experience, when you come out of uni, especially with an undergrad, you don't know anything. No. Nothing. They teach you lots of book smart stuff. Lots of theories and calculations and whatever. You know all of that stuff. But you don't have any emotional intelligence.
I think it's such a good point, because I think organizations should look at hiring at someone's ability to learn and not necessarily their experience. It could be someone that's been in 3 jobs, 4 jobs, that's shown adaptability to certain topics or certain departments within an organization. But if you look at someone that's got 20 years experience but they haven't been exposed to many factors within industry, what does that help?
Exactly.
So it's all about ability to learn, and to adapt.
And who can they teach?
Exactly.
And also the ability to learn has to do with reflection. Because even though we learn at school, at the work, if we don't take that time to slow down, to think, trying to make that knowledge yours, adapt it, and this moment of reflection of self-criticism positively or negatively, trying to find what you are doing well, what you are doing wrong. But also, if you want to keep learning, it's also about finding your own curiosity. And that curiosity only comes from that reflection moment. And most of us are not very used to that, because all of us want to be productive, want to do everything quickly, well, and we don't take that time to really think.
And I'm sorry that I come back to Finland education system, but I found 2 things that they are doing really good. The first one is that they encourage a lot of critical thinking in their kids, and I think it's what Olga is saying. They tell their kids that they could challenge what teachers are teaching. So I think that's really important, because usually you're like, I don't know, from my experience in my school, they were always telling me that the teacher is always right. So you don't have like that opportunity to challenge. But in Finland, like, kids could challenge their teachers. And the other thing is that also in their schools, they teach vocational topics or subjects. So, for example, they learn how to cook, they learn how to do their own clothes. So maybe some of the kids, if they don't want to go to an university, it's possible, it's allowed it. And now they have developed like some of the skills they need to do something else. So I think it's really good.
It's not the be all and end all, but if you go to university, then you failed as a human.
I heard like one teacher that is working in Finland, and she was really happy because she was saying that when she tells the kids that she's teaching like in a classroom, she could actually tell them that they can do anything they want. And she feels that she's not lying to them. She's saying the truth, because in Finland it's possible. If you want to be just a chef, you can be a chef. And it's possible and it's good, and you have you develop the skills through your so it's really good.
And I think these concepts are starting to really evolve in some countries, but what I'm seeing, actually, there is a gap, like particularly from Africa. I'm originally from Zambia, and talking to a company saying you don't need somebody who's got a degree or a master's, few companies will be like, yes, because everyone has got a degree and they always look for somebody with a master's or a PhD. And there's a value proposition here that we can say to the companies that actually the ability to learn is the biggest factor. Let's try and look at that first. And I'm not saying let's not go to university. We're not saying that. But I think we're missing a lot of people in society who've got the ability to learn. So if we have one word from each one of you, what is the biggest recommendation that you would have for the education system as well as corporates?
There was a gap between education system and the corporate demand. What I've seen is sometimes when the student learned, for example, they learned HR, but when they start to learn for 2 years and they found that they are not interested in HR at all, and then they will pay extra amount to the training center to learn some, for example, like IT coding, and then after 6 months they will have a offer from the IT experience. Then what my company was doing was they will have a long-term contract with the universities, like 3 years or 5 years. Then they will do the promotion when the students are in grade 3 or grade 4, and they will attract the students to the company and provide the training to the company. And through the 1 year, they will find whether they match with each other, and if the students are really suitable for the position, and they will have a formal employee contract. So this will expedite saving the time between the gap of a company and the university.
I think it will be to, I don't know if I'm inventing a word, embrace difference.
Embracing the difference, yeah.
Embracing difference. So I think the most important thing for schools and organization is to understand that everyone is different and they have different abilities. So I think it was Barath that was talking that there are some kids that are really good at math, and there are some others that are really good at arts. So I think we need both of them in the corporate world and in general in the world. So it's to embrace difference and to identify who is good for what, and to help them develop these skills. Or
for me would be slow down. Not everything is productivity.
Yep.
And even though if it was only about productivity, slowing down pays results. So let's make it a habit. Take 15 minutes after you finish whatever you are doing. Try to think about the lessons learned, the challenges, and how you can make that challenges turn into an opportunity.
For sure. I think that the educators need education. And what I mean by that is, I know that a teacher in a school, whether it's a primary school or high school or even university, can't know every job that exists in the world. And think about how many jobs didn't exist when we were kids. If I'd said to you when I was a kid, I'm going to be a web developer, you'd say, what?
Are you a spider?
Exactly. I'm going to be a professional spider.
Oh yeah, it's right.
Exactly. But one thing I've realised as I've gotten older is that, and no offence to anyone here who has a relative in education, I told my mum I wanted to be a teacher, and she laughed in my face and said, there's no money in that. I told her I wanted to be a nurse, and she said, they get paid peanuts, don't bother. I told her I wanted, and so on and so on. You get the picture. But having gotten to the stage I am now, there are so many things I wish I had done. I wish I had known that if I was really into sewing and making my own clothes, it doesn't mean I'm going to be penniless. Actually, those people earn a lot of money in a certain niche of that industry that I've now discovered exists. They need to be, they meaning the teachers and parents to some extent, need to keep an open mind as to how people can make a living.
True.
And just because from your experience nurses get paid peanuts, there was a time the UK was importing nurses from Kenya like their lives depended on it because they didn't get enough, and they got all sorts of incentives and they got paid really well. I could have been a nurse.
It's never too late.
It's never too late. This is the other
You'd
thing.
make a really good nurse.
This is the other thing I'm trying to embrace. It's never too late, but at the same time, don't, like Barath was saying, don't squash kids' dreams. Don't cut them off and say, no, you can't do that. Because then they'll spend the rest of their lives saying, if I'm not a lawyer, doctor, engineer, or a banker, I failed. Because that's what we're creating. By not keeping an open mind into all the different industries that exist and ways that you can figure it out as you go along.
It's encouraging creativity from grassroots level all the way through to organizations. I mean, what Barath said, if a kid is thinking about art and acting during a maths lesson, don't just squash that. That's important to understand what they're passionate about, what drives them, and who knows, they could become an Oscar winner.
Exactly.
A top musician in a band. Like, encourage this kind of behavior, and then fostering through to organizations. If people want to learn on the job, create a program for them. Development programs, employee development programs. It has to be part of the employee life cycle. Continual learning at organizations. So, just encourage creativity and just be open-minded.
For sure.
Yeah. For me, I think the most important thing is the education institutions, parents, or even organizations like companies and stuff like that should differentiate the academic performance from an individual potential.
Yeah.
So, differentiate intelligence from academic performance as well.
Yeah.
Because they're two different things, and identify potential and work to embrace that potential and get more out of it.
There's one thing, because it's really bagging me, because I know we've had this conversation, Audrey, where you talked about sponsorship.
Oh, yes.
And I think it's very timely. Before we just end,
Yes.
I want you to really kind of explain what sponsorship is and why it's important in organizations.
Okay, I'll give you a personal example. When you're in an organization, especially when you start from the very bottom, entry level, there are times when no matter how hard you work, and this is very true in creative industries, if you don't know how to play the game, then you don't necessarily progress at the rate you should. Your hard work isn't always rewarded in the way that it should be, and what you need then is an advocacy program. Maybe not formal, sometimes it's very informal, where you have somebody within the organization who recognizes your potential, recognizes your aptitude, your willingness to learn, and they kind of take you under their wing, and they have to have power and they have to have influence. And by power, I mean the power to get in front of the people who hold the keys to the next level, like a video game. So to level up, you need someone who believes in you.
Yeah.
And part of that is putting yourself out there. So you can't just hide in the corner, hoping someone notices you. You have to do the work to put yourself in front of people, identify who the potential sponsors are, and explain to them where you might be struggling, what it is you ultimately want, and figure out how they can help you.
Yeah.
And then they can put themselves in front of the people who they can advocate for you and say, you know what? Olga really wants to be a web developer, and she's been coding in her spare time, and she's been doing X, Y, and Z. She just needs more opportunity to get into the back end of whatever website. And that person, because it's coming from someone that they know and trust, are more willing to give you a chance. And then you level up and you get to the next stage. You might find a different sponsor, you might have the same one. And if all goes well, you can become that person for someone else who's just starting out. But it's so important because let's say you're an introverted person. Let's say you're shy. Let's say you're working in a very male-dominated environment and you're a woman. Let's say that it's a very aggressive kind of workplace and you don't really know how to do what I just described. The idea of a sponsor is so important, and it's often informal.
Yeah.
It's often informal.
And it's interesting to know that a lot of people don't actually know about sponsorship. They always think mentorship most. Demi, did you have anything to add before we close?
I want to add that as an education or learning itself, it never ends when you get a diploma, you get a certification, or you are a higher position in a company, like C-level position. It never ends up with your with this kind of thing, or whatever age you are. So you should be a life learner.
So we should all become life learners. We've not stopped learning. We should embrace differences, right? And always look for a sponsor. Reflect as well, as mentioned with Olga. Like, let's try and reflect as we're learning. Let's not just keep on doing stuff for the sake of doing it. Take time to reflect. So, yeah, I've really enjoyed this chat today. And I think I would like to end with a quotation from Nelson Mandela, who I truly love, may his soul rest in peace, where he says, education is the most powerful weapon which can be used to change the world. True. So let's change the world. And thank you, guys.
Thank you.
On the last vlog, we discussed INKOSHO's goal. If you missed this, please find some time to watch the introduction video. The vlogs will be available on YouTube and the INKOSHO website every 2 weeks.